going on, everybody? Grim Repair here. Today I've got my Overdrive ready to go into my truck. It's an 86 F350 with a C6 transmission. This is what comes in the kit. You get this adapter. This bolts on where your tail housing goes. Transmission mount goes here. It's got a coupler in there. Comes with a slip yoke, some screws, some shims, speedometer adapter, speedometer cable, extension, the electronics, which are a wiring harness, 2 lights, the controller. They've changed the style of this. It's a lot smaller. It just goes under your dash. Inline fuse, speedometer signal sensor, floor switch to put it into overdrive or out of overdrive, and a switch to turn it on. And then here's the overdrive unit itself. You're gonna need some white lithium grease, and this will either take Lucas gear oil or Dextron 3. It's in the instructions if I got it wrong. It also comes with instructions. I'm going to show you how to install it. Should just be basic hand tools and probably a transmission jack or a regular jack with a block of wood. And then you're going to have to get your drive line shortened. So let's get started. Since we're going to have to remove the drive shaft, I'm going to put something to keep the truck from rolling away. Maybe also put the emergency brake on. The first thing we're going to do is remove the drive shaft, and we're going to have 2 bolts here, one on the other side for this carrier bearing, and then there's going to be 4 nuts back here on the rear end holding the U-joint to the rear end. So but your car or truck may be a little different, depends on your setup, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. You also want to check your drive line angles before you start doing this. Make sure they don't change too much. You shouldn't need to adjust them, but you might. So depends on if your truck's lifted, lowered, all kinds of things. So anyway, just put an angle finder on your drive shaft, and if it changes, try to put it back as original as you could by putting some shims under here, or maybe some shims under the mount. Depends on what you need. All right, now that we got the drive shaft out, it was a 13 millimeter back there, and then the carrier bearing right here was a 14 millimeter, and we slid it out of the way. We're going to loosen the nuts that hold the trailing mount on, and those are 16 millimeters for me. And then we're going to jack the transmission up, and we're going to loosen the bolts that hold the tail housing to the transmission, and we may have to pull the motor mount to get to the bottom ones. And can't really tell if there's one under there or not. There probably is, and I'll let you know what size that is. It's a pretty big nut there and there. And then we're going to remove the speedometer cable here. I think that's a 10 or an 11 millimeter bolt holding that on, and then it just slides out. All right, now that we got the tail housing off, some notes. The bottom 2 bolts are the shorter ones. The ones up top on the sides are longer. I kind of laid them out here so to keep them in an organized fashion, but there's only 2 different sizes, so pretty easy to remember. You'll also need a drain pan. The heads on those bolts were 14 millimeters, and I did have to remove the motor mount before I slid out the tail shaft. Otherwise, I'd have been jacking the transmission way up. The bolts for that were 19 millimeters. So now that we've got that off, I'm just gonna slide the gear vendor adapter on, put on the new gasket that came with the kit, and then we'll shim up the coupler after that. But I don't know, I'd say I'm about 30 minutes, an hour in. It's moving along pretty good. The vacuum hose is also bolted up on top there with a clamp, so you want to make sure you don't pinch that in between the two pieces. It's out of the way. That's not pinched to get these bolts started before I tighten them up all the way. Put that bracket back up there on the top bolt hole. Now I'm pushing it toward the transmission, and I'm just going to snug these up. I'm not going crazy on them. I'm going in a crisscross pattern. And make sure you don't put the mount back on there first. You want to put that on last, or you can't get those bottom two bolts in. I wasn't thinking about it. I just put it there so I wouldn't forget where and how it went. But now I'm gonna have to take it back off. All right, so I got the adapter screwed onto the back of the transmission, or bolted on. And gear vendor says you should tighten it 40 to 45 foot-pounds. Don't go that far. I ended up stripping out this top one here, and it felt bad to me going that tight, so I did it on one where I knew I could get to the backside. So on this one, I'm gonna have to get a longer bolt and put a nut over here on it and tighten it down. Factory spec on the factory tail housing is 30 to 35 foot-pounds. So on the rest of them, I went 30 foot-pounds, and I'm gonna give them a call and let them know. But don't do what I did and follow the directions, because you're gonna end up stripping it out. So now after we get that bolted on, we're gonna put this copper on here. I lubricated it with some white lithium grease. Now I'm gonna make sure it's fully seated by tapping on it with a plastic hammer. Then I'm gonna take a straight edge, and I'm gonna go from gasket surface to gasket surface. So you're gonna have to go in between some of these things sticking out here. And we want 0 to 15 thousandths play in between here. We've got a little bit more than that right now. And so they give you these shims. Right in here in this bag. They look like this. So I'm going to stick some shims in there until I don't have so much play. I think it's probably going to take about 2. That's pretty close to the maximum there. We'll put a third one in. I'm starting to teeter with 3, so we're going to put 2 of them in there, and I'm going to show you where they go. You're going to pull this back out, and they go inside of here. Alright, and since we got the feeler gauge set to 15 thousandths, I shouldn't be able to fit it in there. And I can't. So let's see. how much can I fit in there? I've got about 12 thousandths play in there. I can't fit the 13. 12 fits. And it took about 2 shims. Alright, now after that, we can mount up the overdrive unit. The overdrive unit has studs sticking out of it, and then nuts are going to go on the back side. You want to lubricate the splines with some Dextron 3. Alright, now we put the gasket on the gear vendor overdrive unit, and it says to tighten the bolts to 6 to 9 foot-pounds in a crisscross pattern. Actually, they're nuts. You're going to slide this up onto that adapter. We lubricated the spline here with Dextron 3, and we're going to put it up there and rotate the shaft back here till it all lines up, and then we're going to go ahead and tighten it down. And these are 7/16 these nuts. Alright, so we've got that all bolted up. Now we're going to hook up the speedometer system, and after that we're going to measure the drive shaft. We're going to measure from this seal to the center of the carrier bolt slot here. At least on mine, I have a 2-piece drive shaft. I'm going to give that measurement to my drive shaft guy. You should probably call your drive shaft guy first, see how he wants you to measure it. It might be different. That's just what he suggested for me. Also, I noticed the fill plug here was loose, but you're probably going to have to top it off. I know some of the fluid leaked out on mine, so just make sure that the plug and the fill plug are both tight. So I'm going to hook up this sensor here. Put a little bit of Vaseline on this O-ring here, on the sensor, and then the threaded side is going to go on here. And this little driver here is going to slide down in just like that. And your stock speedometer is going to slide in to that. Then we got another O-ring here. It's going to go on this side of it. And the extension they gave you, it's going to screw into the back of this signal generator. This generates a signal so that the controller knows when to shift into overdrive. But get that on there. Then we're going to slide the factory end into here. Oh, crap. Don't let that fall out. And it's spinning this end, looking in there. Alright, so on your stock Speedo, there's a clip here that holds this gear on. I took a pick and kind of pried it up. I don't know if you can see that well or not, but right here. It looks like that. I'm gonna set it aside. So this gear is gonna come off. So we just slide that gear out of the way. You have to pull this O-ring off of here. Again, ow! Using the pick. All right, come on. they gave us a thicker one. It's gonna be probably pretty hard to stretch onto there though. Use the pick. Man. Jeez. This is pretty tight. There we go. Roll it into place. Put some more Vaseline on that. It's going to be a tight fit. All right. There we go. And it snapped in there and I had to push it pretty good. Alright, now this is probably going to get mounted somewhere up on the frame rail here so it's not just dangling. But this is going to get screwed into the overdrive unit. Just like this. You want to keep this cable from having any kinks in it. You don't want it binding up. Alright, and like I said, I'm gonna measure for my drive shaft. Once I get the drive shaft back in, then all I gotta do is the wiring and top off any fluids. Some of the fluid leaked out of the transmission, so I'm gonna wanna check that. And I'm gonna wanna fill this back up. So I'll see you when we get the drive shaft back. Alright, so for the wiring, I got my foot switch mounted down there just temporarily until I figure out exactly where I wanna put it, or if I even wanna keep it down there. I might wanna put a switch on the shifter here. I've got the lights and the automatic manual mode switch down there in the ashtray. I made a bracket and I can pretty much close the ashtray. If you want it perfect, you're gonna have to trim it a little, but it's pretty close. I don't ever smoke, so I don't need the ashtray. I've got the controller mounted up here with a zip tie above this dash bracket here. Here's the main plug for that, running to all of its accessories, and then what does run out down to the gear vendor is running through this grommet here. I made a hole in it. I'm running my boost gauge, my exhaust temp wiring, and my tranny temp gauge are also running through that grommet hole for those gauges up there. Then I just kind of ran it the way the factory did, down from that grommet hole up over the brake booster and down along the frame rail. And it's running here through this wire loom to the speedo sensor and the I guess it's an actuator to put it into overdrive. I had to lengthen one of these wires a little bit. I think it was this one. No, actually I think it was this one. I had to lengthen it a little bit, but I soldered everything up. It's all under the wire loom. I gotta trim these zip ties down, but yeah, it all works. It kicks in a little earlier than I'd like in automatic mode, but it works. So that's it. There's my drive shaft. The front one's pretty short, and that's it. Thanks for watching. High five, you did it.